Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week, we read Chapter 8, I Make a Dangerous Promise.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, that sounds super dangerous. Man, Percy Jackson's really in there right now, in the thick of it.
Yeah, this was a pretty straightforward chapter title. He does make a dangerous promise. I don't think I guessed what the promise was, did I? I think I went to some sort of thought process about him making a promise to Tyson or something, because I knew he was going to go underwater because of, what's his name?
Blackjack.
Yeah, that was sort of like a weird misdirect where he does go under the ocean.
So what you're telling me, B, is he goes under the sea.
Yeah, darling, it's better done where it's wetter under the sea. Yeah, okay. You get the idea.
Yes. So in the next book, Percy Jackson, this is a spoiler, B, he actually has a crab named Sebastian.
Mm-hmm. That'd be pretty great, honestly. If we had a little crab sidekick. Why does he not have more water-based sidekicks? I think that would be really fun.
Well, I mean, you can't have like a water-based sidekick in like the middle of the desert or in the middle of like the United States.
He can if they have a fishbowl. Why doesn't he have like the very sassy fish from Cat in the Hat? He could just like be carrying that around, like making just sort of a judgmental goldfish face the whole time.
But I have a feeling it's going to be like the part where like the fishbowl breaks. It's going to be like in SpongeBob with Shell City where they're just drying out and like Percy's trying to like give the fish like water by like spitting on it or something.
Yeah, or like the SpongeBob thing of just being like, I don't need it. I don't need it.
Or they'll do like the illogical thing they did in Finding Dory where like Marlin and Nemo fall into like the, the mop bucket, and it's like they usually put chemicals with mop water. It's not just soap. Like they just die. It's like, oh, I found Nemo. He's dead.
Yeah. Well, we bleached these two fish and they're dead now. That would have been a dark ending, but it's fine.
But yes. So what did you think of this chapter, B?
I thought it was good. So I didn't guess the promise at all. Yeah, it's kind of a misdirect of a title in some ways because he does go down to the ocean and he does encounter a weird creature. I guess this is for like foreshadowing reasons to show that like the whole stirring thing is still happening. Like we have to remember that all these new monsters are emerging that he doesn't recognize, and so that was an interesting scene. Also, I thought it was, I guess, an interesting like analyzation of how Percy solves problems because he like couldn't use his sword. So I think that was like the main purpose of that. But yeah, that had nothing to do with the promise he makes, which ends up being to Nico.
And rereading this chapter, I was really interested in the idea of like, oh, he has to make this promise, but also it's like almost like we have one thing that leads to another in this one rather than it just being the whole chapter is dedicated to saving Bessie. It's a little bit of both. It's like we're going to have this mini adventure and then we're going to have this thing with Nico and then Percy Jackson is on his way. Ooh.
Do you know like the structure of Simpsons episodes? It kind of reminded me of that a little bit, where it's like you think you're going in one direction, but actually something happens midway through that sends you in a different direction. Because I had a sense that Percy was going to go on the quest anyway. He talked to his mom. She said, you should do it, Percy. I believe in you. You should do what you think is right. So that was a kind of surprising conversation he had last chapter, I think. So he's pretty encouraged to already do this. He wants to help Annabeth. He doesn't want to feel useless. He doesn't want to go back home. And this is the day that he's supposed to be leaving. So it's now or never, basically. So I knew it was going to happen, but I thought maybe this chapter was just going to be shorter and he was going to have some interaction with Tyson or someone else underneath the water. And then maybe next chapter there was going to be some stuff about him going on the quest like the next morning. But instead it's like kind of like whatever. I mean, like, I don't think it's that important, the stuff that happens with what is this? The sea cow, I guess. I don't know what you call
Bessie.
Those things. Bessie, yeah, is the name that he gives, which I love too, because sometimes Percy really reminds me of myself, just like the way he tries to justify the weirdness of himself. I don't know, like when he says the phrase, I don't know, I started calling her Bessie, it seemed like a good name for a cow. I was like, I'd probably do that in his scenario, especially as like a 13, 14-year-old, whatever.
The funny thing is like the idea of like calling a cow Bessie is kind of like the same thing if it's like, was the weird thing? It's like having like it's not the best word to say. It's like not like a fat name, but it's like you have like an idea of like a big thing. You're gonna call it Bessie or Bertha, which is funny. It's like it's like just like,
whoa, Bessie,
old Bessie or old Bertha. You know, this old truck that I have. Papa. I never really understood why they called a cow Bessie. I mean, I understand like have Bertha or something because it sounds like a big name like Bertha. Or I guess Bessie's almost the same.
At first, I thought that this was like a reference, maybe because we were talking about maybe it being like a reference to there definitely was like a famous historical cow. There's a reason that this is associated with a cow. This is tenuous, but it's kind of interesting. The Latin for cow is boss, which led to cows being called bossy. For English speakers who don't know Latin, Bessie makes more sense. So they're speaking Latin. Percy speaks Latin. So that's what's happening right now. He knows the Latin root of cow, and he's like, I feel like it's a good name for a cow. That might be a very deep cut reason why Rick Riordan picked that, or maybe people just associate that name with cows. We may never know how deep this goes.
Now it's even funnier because Blackjack calls Percy boss. So is he calling him a cow?
He's calling him a cow. Well, boss with just one S, so like Boz.
Oh, Boz, okay. But yeah, I think that's interesting, we have the idea of Blackjack calling Percy boss, and then you have the idea of Percy calling Bessie, because Bessie, I guess, means boss. That's interesting. There's one thing I wanted to talk about I thought was interesting, because, you go through this chapter. The problem with this series is you can't really do like multiple perspectives in this book because it's all Percy Jackson. It's all framed that narrative of being in Percy Jackson. Like you can't really have it that way unless it's established earlier on. I know a lot of books like quintessentially the idea of it's going to be Percy Jackson because it's all pretty much like almost like a first person perspective with like sometimes it has like a weird like third person like narration to it.
Yeah, third person omniscient almost. Well, because he is omniscient though, because he in the past tense. Yeah, what would you call that? That's first person omniscient, possibly?
Again, it's like the idea of Rick Riordan, like he writes in first person sometimes, but then he has like these third person things as well as he's talking in the past tense.
I don't think there's any third person things though, because there's no thing where it's just like little did Percy know. Like there's no other outside person who's talking about Percy saying something that Percy doesn't directly know. Everything that the reader knows. He's talking in the past tense, so he has like the omniscience sort of a third person narrator, but then there's
there's parts in like Sea of Monsters where he said, little did I know I wouldn't be coming home for a while. Like there actually is like small third person things, but it's in the perspective from Percy. So that's what I mean by third person. It's like those weird things where it's just like a weird like tipsy turvy thing. And the problem again with Percy Jackson is you can't really have Percy Jackson not go on the quest because you need him to be there to experience the story. Unless you have like a split story where they go off and then Percy does his own things and, quintessentially, the crossroads meet up.
Okay, so I did some searching about different points of view because it's been a minute since I've done some research about this. But so first person obviously is from the perspective of someone who's actually experiencing the story. So that is technically Percy because he is experiencing it. First person omniscient is in which the narrator is a character in the story, but also knows the thoughts and feelings of all the other characters. I don't think that's accurate either because he doesn't know everything.
I guess to break it down for people, first person is I swung my sword. I guess was it first person omniscient is like little did I know I was started to swing my sword really hard.
Yeah, I think probably the closest you could say what Percy Jackson is it's third person limited because he is, even though that he's in the story, he's speaking as an outside party because he's already had it happen, and his knowledge is somewhat limited because he doesn't know the thoughts and feelings of every character, like say almost like a Lemony Snicket character. Like I think that's third person omniscient because he has like this weird understanding of like what a lot of people I don't know, actually that might be limited. It's kind of a weird example, but
so the funny thing about Series of Unfortunate Events is a lot of it is just Lemony Snicket making things up because there's the parts where it's like I couldn't really experience the thoughts and feelings.
That's true, yes. That's a different thing in canon. So yeah, he's actually limited, right? Because he says things like I don't claim to know what she thought there, or like there's moments where he specifically says he doesn't know how characters feel, so that is an example of the perspective being limited.
But then that's also, it's like the weird thing of it's also an investigation, so you're getting it. Oh my god, it hurts my brain to think about all these like styles, But that's the one thing I enjoy about Percy Jackson is it has like this interesting hybrid. I'm sure someone's going to bring up like what it actually is, and we're going to be like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, someone correct us if you know what the specific perspective is. I think it's third person limited because there's nothing else that really captures the perspective of what's going on.
I can agree with you on the third person limited just because there's the times where, he does speak in the past tense because the first part of the book is, hey, I didn't want to be a half-blood, but here's my story to tell you guys why you shouldn't be.
We talked a little bit about this way, way, way back when we first started reading the books he is an interesting thing that sort of grabs you where you think, okay, well, how far in the future is Percy right now? Like, he doesn't know certain things, but he does know other things. Like, he kind of knows how this specific story ends. So it almost feels like each book is told from the perspective of a Percy existing at the very end of that book, but no further. But it's hard to say.
So the problem with that, though, is like, yes, you could have that, except I wish they would have done it, then I wrote it in my diary, or I did something where, he specifically says that...
You wish it was more of like a frame narrative,
not that it's a frame narrative, but he brings it, I'm going to write about this in my journal tonight, or do something that isn't...
that is a frame narrative. Anything that has an outside story that justifies the story that you're, experiencing. Like, for instance, Grand Budapest Hotel is a frame narrative.
Okay, yeah. Okay. That makes sense. But I'm just saying it's like the idea of like Percy Jackson has the frame narrative, but I also feel like when it comes to like the idea of it's like it's happening in the past, all this stuff, but yet like when he talks about like monsters and stuff, he's talking about it as if it's happening right there and then, just to give like fill it in, like rather than having like little did I know Auntie M was actually Medusa.
Little did I know that the monster was scary. Like, he does almost speak about, but he doesn't though, because it's still past tense. He's like, and then I grabbed my sword. It wasn't, I'm grabbing my sword right now or something. Like, it's not present tense.
God, Rick Riordan, it's a conundrum. But then there's also the idea of, remember that Sally Jackson wants to be a writer, so maybe she's helping him along, like he's actually just like recollecting everything, and she's just like typing it all down for him. Like, that could be like a reasonable explanation.
I'm always fascinated by, like, the justification for what a story is. Like, is this story just, like, being beamed into our heads just from an understanding of, like, this is the story, what happens to Percy? Or is there actually, like, a narrative reason for why he's telling these things? But it makes for the story to be really weird and interesting because he never tells you, right? Because that would ruin the narrative tension. But he does know. He does know what's going to happen to him because he speaks as if he does. Then I felt that I wasn't going to come back to my cabin for a long time. Like, I knew that something was happening. I knew that I made a mistake. I knew that I made a promise that it was difficult to keep. Like, all of these things have sort of the benefit of hindsight, but he doesn't say what that hindsight is, which is not really the way anyone would ever tell a story, other than, I guess, if they were trying intentionally to make someone feel the drama of it.
Also, you have the idea of, the beginning of the first books, like, hey, I didn't want to do all this, meaning that he actually survived long enough to actually write down these stories. Like, he's not going to die halfway through the book.
Yeah, so then it spoils you in some ways, because as long as it's in past tense, you're like, well, he's not going to die in media res, and then it's Annabeth has to take up the mantle of telling his story or something. That would be so weird. I
just imagine it's like that Percy gets his head chopped off, and all of a sudden the book, hey, sorry guys, Percy Jackson died, so I want to be taking over. Annabeth Chase, daughter of Athena.
And the part of Percy will be played by Annabeth this evening.
Or the other thing is Percy Jackson gets his head chopped off, and then literally it's like series of unfortunate events where there's just blank pages now. Like halfway through the book, it just becomes blank.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, because I think that it says a lot about the story if you understand like where he's coming from, how old he is. Like, is he very old? Is he like that changes so much like your perspective on what just happened.
Well, then that would make sense for like the dated references, because that's what he can remember.
It's like, remember Hilary Duff?
Back in my day, I remember Hilary Duff. I remember Thalia. She listened to the Green Day.
To the Green Day. For some, you add the definite article. As soon as you get old, you say the Green Day, even though you called it Green Day when you were a kid for some reason.
Well, I mean, it's like the idea of it's like old people saying everything's an iPod.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like that tweet that I made the other day that was like, every old person calls anything on the internet they don't understand a blog. Like, so many people are like they try to talk about the podcast and they're like, hey, so how's that blog going? And I'm like, I wouldn't know. I don't have one. I don't have a blog. I have a Tumblr that's sort of like a blog. It's tenuously defined as a blog, but I wouldn't call it that, probably.
It's microblogging, if I remember correctly, what they consider Tumblr to be. It's microblogging. Same as Twitter. But what I like about the story, again, is the idea of it might be like this weird, like, frame narrative kind of thing, but that's what makes it more interesting because it isn't just like a first-person perspective where you're just... all it is just description from Percy's brain about, like, everything that he loves and hates and feels. There's actually, like, motion, and he's kind of, like, being snarky about it in the past tense, which makes it, I guess, present tense in a weird way. Oh my god, it hurts my brain to think about. Yeah.
Snarky in the past tense. That's a big mood, isn't it?
Well, yeah, he's being snarky in the past tense. That's the name of a band that I'd love to hear, too.
Yeah, you could feel his frustration. Like, that's another weird thing too, is like his emotions are very palpable, as if it's still happening. I think that's what you were getting at with the monster descriptions, where like he'll fight a monster and he'll be like, he'll have the sense of the immediate drama that he's there, even though he's telling it in the past tense. And it's similar to like any kind of frustration, like, oh, I carried the oracle back to the big house and it was gross, and I viscerally feel that right now, even though it's not happening because it already happened. And same thing with this chapter where he's like, oh, this interaction with this sea cow was very weird, and I called her Bessie. I don't exactly know why, like, whatever. And like, would you remember details like that of those moments? Like, maybe you would if you were telling a story to a friend. Like, I don't know.
I mean, the job of an author is to make stuff up, so obviously he's going to make things up if you can't recollect. It's the same thing with like having like Violet and Quigley up on the slippery slope, and it's just like it's not important because it's in the context. It's like give the characters privacy.
Give the privacy. Yeah, I'll leave you two kids alone. Yeah, I always thought that was like an interesting example of a narrator opting to not give information, and I always think about that with this story because the information that he opts to not give is the information that is the whole story, because he has the hindsight of understanding what's going to happen, but also the like justification of the narrative where he doesn't tell you right away. He doesn't say, anyway, so I did eventually save Annabeth that winter break. I was worried then, but I sure did save her. But like he doesn't say that to the audience.
I think the best example I can possibly give of like a style that's kind of similar to this is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, where all the future stuff, because the book takes place in the future and then in the past, all the future stuff is in third person, but then the main character, Quovolth, is talking about his past, and he's talking about it in the first person perspective, but also where he's talking about things that are going to happen or things that, to craft a story to make it more interesting. Oh, I'll leave this detail out, but then I'll bring it back in later on, because that's when it's going to serve a better purpose. And kind of like going back onto the road less traveled that we're going to be talking about is that, again, that's the idea, because you have like this weird corner where you don't have like multiple perspectives. Like you don't have a chapter just devoted to Talia or, to Zoe or Bianca or Nico. You only have Percy Jackson. So you have to have like either he goes on the quest or he goes on a separate quest, but
yeah,
he goes home, and then you have like this weird book where kind of like it like routes itself back into the main quest because the drama is what's happening.
I think the only way that Rick Riordan would ever be able to justify something like that, like if, let's say, for like thought experiment's sake, that Percy didn't go on the quest, right? What would happen for sure is he would go home and he would hate it, and he would feel very distressed about not helping Annabeth, and it would just be a series of dreams he was having about what was happening with Annabeth, and then it would cut back to what was happening with the other characters, because it wouldn't be from their perspective, but maybe he would hear word from Chiron and he would get an update as to what was happening, or maybe there would be stuff happening in his day-to-day life that reflected what was happening in the plot. But really, that's the only way that could have been done.
Thinking about it, the way that could also work here is because we already have something that's set up in universe. It's the empathy link. where you have, because Grover's going on the quest.
Right.
So you have the idea of Percy's technically could be in there by proxy, either possibly, controlling Grover or, seeing all the events through Grover's perspective, thus going back to Percy Jackson. That's another way. Oh my God, I like that. There's actually in-universe, there's different things that you can do.
It makes him involved more.
But I still like the idea that Percy's going on this quest because conveniently Phoebe is out and Percy is in.
Right, yeah, she gets poisoned, which there was a little bit of foreshadowing for that, because we did see that the Stoll brothers were going to play some mean trick on her. That's a very mean trick, right? That's not just a prank. They almost kill her.
Well, no, they just make her break out into very vicious hives. Yes. Well, yeah, it's Minotaur blood. It's a mild acid.
A mild acid? So lemon juice, or is it an acid?
Well, it isn't burning through a xenomorph blood. It's not gonna burn a whole thing. An example I would give to it is possibly. So, did you ever watch the first Terminator movie, B?
A long time ago.
So there's a part in the movie where they blow up the Terminator and he's kind of on fire where his jacket is smoking, and smoke wouldn't really work on that. So they actually poured a small acid onto his Arnold Schwarzenegger's jacket. That's kind of simulating smoke because the acid's actually dissolving the jacket around him. But I think the idea is they thought it was going to just be a little bit, and they accidentally used a lot of it.
Not.
Yeah. It's the idea of in Harry Potter with Fred and George, they'll pull on pranks, and then some of them could be disastrous.
Could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's really scary though. I remember I took printmaking, and there was just a giant vat of acid that you dropped these metal plates into to etch them. And it wasn't a science lab, so there really wasn't the decorum or the responsibility associated with something that dangerous. So it was just this big old plastic tub with a very loose fitting lid, and people just were dunking things in the acid, and if that got on your arm, you started to itch, and I definitely had some paranoia that my arm would just have a hole eaten through it by this weird acid from this class that I didn't even particularly like. So I don't know, when I read this I was kind of freaked out by how dark and creepy that prank was.
So what you're telling me, B, is they should check the pH levels of the Minotaur blood and see if it's safe for human contact. But let's go back a little bit on track here, because it's one of those things where we could easily talk about the narration and all these things. But the most important thing is that Percy Jackson is friends with the animals. And by gosh, we're going to see it in this chapter.
Yeah, he's a Disney princess. I guess he is a Disney prince. He's a Disney prince because Disney Hyperion does the books, so he's a Disney prince.
Well, B, really, if you think about it right now, the way Percy's acting, he's a little bit of a princess. Just a little bit.
Because he's just all high and mighty, oh God, I gotta help these people.
Come along, children. I can't do it. I can't do a Disney princess impression, but I just imagine he gets into the water Little Mermaid style.
He's reverse Little Mermaid, really.
How Percy Jackson emerges out of the water as Ariel in The Little Mermaid.
He's on the rock and he flips his hair.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what happens. So what I like about this is that they show how Percy Jackson is almost early 90s Ted Turner type of we're gonna save the environment.
Yeah, very Captain Planet, this first part of the chapter, where he's just heaving animals out of wreckage, basically.
And he's talking about the dangers of this is what happens when you do this.
Right, yeah, of bottom trawling and stuff, yeah.
If I remember this correctly, is that Rick Riordan goes scuba diving a lot, so I'm just imagining him just types this in, I need to make this a statement. Did he have to put this in there specifically to get a grant almost, or is he talking about a special ecological issue almost? Because we had in the last book, we had him talking and nerding out about Civil War era boats.
Yeah. An environmental special episode. Yeah, I get what you mean. This is what Percy has to say about the trapped creature in the water. I got closer and saw the problem. A dark shape, some kind of animal, was wedged halfway under the boat and tangled in a fishing net, one of those big nets that they use on trawlers to catch everything at once. I hated those things. It was bad enough they drowned porpoises and dolphins, but they also occasionally caught mythological animals. When the nets got tangled, some lazy fisherman would just cut them loose and let the trapped animals die. Apparently this poor creature had been mucking around on the bottom of Long Island Sound and had somehow gotten itself tangled in the net of this sunken fishing boat. It's very sad.
So the way I was looking at this is Rick Riordan is doing a lot of like narration about this to the point of where he's talking about this because he wants to talk about this rather than it just being something Percy would want to talk about.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because normally you don't think of Percy as like a bleeding heart environmentalist necessarily. Like that's not something from his character. But then he just goes on this rant all of a sudden where he's like, "Oh, I hated those things." But I guess it does make sense character-wise because he is the son of the ocean god, so he cares about the ocean. He has like an implicit, affection for all of the creatures of the sea.
Yes, but then if we're talking again about the past tenses, like he would talk about this in that way, it's like the idea of I like it doesn't bother me because I didn't know about that really. It's like, again, it's one of those things you teach the kids something that's important to both Rick Riordan and by proxy, these kids are going to be, they're going to be impacted by this, and they're going to make sure that when they're in their fishing boats, they don't tangle their nets or do whatever they do with this.
Yeah, by the way, this is still a problem, the bottom trawler things. I literally just saw an article about this. So it's kind of sad in a way that this was written a while ago and this is still a problem environmentally. It's hard to say. Like, I think a little bit about this in the context of Rick Riordan, where it sometimes verges on very special episode in the way that he talks about important issues. It's like, we're going to talk about bullying now. We're going to talk about prejudice. We're going to talk about people with learning disabilities. Like, there's definitely moments where you sense that he obviously wants to tackle something important, and usually it's done pretty subtly and artfully, but I don't know. This moment it did strike me as being like, oh, he really is trying to teach an environmental lesson here, and I don't know how well he did making that a characterization for Percy that like makes sense. Like, oh, of course, yeah, Percy cares about that,
So the difference between how it's done here and how it's done everywhere else is that how it's done everywhere else with like dyslexia and bullying and stuff, it's in the narration as well as it's done kind of subtly almost. Whereas here it's just like the equivalent of Annabeth's talking about food and all of a sudden, did you know that like thousands of people die every year by gun-related incidents? It's like, wait, what? Just comes out of like left field somewhere. It's like, what?
Yeah, they even like make fun of that sort of on do you remember the show Dinosaurs?
Yes.
Like,
yeah,
there's like
I
that
love
episode
dinosaurs.
where like they have like the fake drug episode, and then they're just like, we had some fun here, and it's like the guy dressed as the dinosaur cell, and he's like on a stool, and he's just like, anyway, we had some fun here, but drug use is no joke. Like, that's sort of, it feels sometimes a little bit like that when I'm reading Percy Jackson, and I don't even think that's a criticism, because we just had a convo about this off mic.
It's not necessarily a criticism because, he's teaching something and it goes right back into the action because this is like a paragraph at most. And after that, it doesn't really get brought up because I guess in universe, again, like hippocampi can't really like bite the net, so they can't free them. And they have all these things.
It also justifies why Percy is there, because maybe he hates those things because he also has to go down and save all these creatures all the time. So maybe he's like gradually learning of the plight of these different sea creatures because they keep calling upon him to help. So like that's how he learns about their issues. Like he does talk about that a little bit, maybe a chapter ago when we first encounter Blackjack. And he's like, oh yeah, every once in a while I'm called down to the ocean by the hippocampi every time I go by the water, and they make me go and save dolphins and stuff. Like, I guess that would be a sort of object lesson for him to understand, oh, well, I guess there are these like really bad fishing practices that badly affect these marine animals, and I care about them because I'm, a demigod, son of Poseidon, so I guess I'll care about the ocean. So maybe that's enough justification.
Or the other reason is Percy Jackson's so annoyed that he keeps trying to save all these animals. It's like, oh my God, I'm just going to cut the problem out. We're just going to have a world.
Yeah, just kill the fishermen.
Yeah, just kill all the fishermen. Like, seriously, all their boats just drown. Now I'm imagining like the fear of like Percy Jackson watching Blackfish for the first time and like freaking out.
Oh my God. Him watching, what is it? Is Free Willy? Is that the name of the one?
Yeah, the orca.
With the whale?
The killer whale?
Yeah, and it jumps over the kid.
Well, Percy Jackson, that's just like a normal thing. It's like, hey, Gus, could you please stop that? As like they have like the Free Willy moment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it tracks. It tracks that he would be annoyed by this because he deals with it on a regular basis, and we've kind of already established that. But, I mean, what I was going to say was, we just talked about this off mic, that we're both fans of Rick Riordan because of the way that he deals with a lot of issues in a very thoughtful way. And I think there was definitely probably a lot of conversation, a lot of thought, a lot of research that went into just this moment that he wrote into this chapter. Like, he probably thought, oh, I'm teaching these kids something important. I should probably mention this.
Well, yes, and also I think because Rick Riordan as well as James Cameron are both like deep sea divers, or at least they go scuba diving, because I know there's a picture of Rick scuba diving, so I'm sure he's gone at least once, so that means he's gone more than I have. And that, maybe that's an issue where he heard about it from like an actual person, or he's witnessed this firsthand and he just wanted to put it into the book because it's an important thing, but it's also the idea of, it's like you forget about these things. There's fishermen that do all these things and think, oh, they're just going to get out once the net's underwater and once they cut the net. No, it's not the case. Even mythical creatures get stuck in these nets and they will slowly die, which is horrifying because, again, I guess monsters turn into dust. I guess, yeah, they're magic. It's like in Harry Potter with like killing a unicorn and drinking its blood. Like, you'll live, but you'll live a very cursed life, a half-life.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's kind of really sad because then the magic creatures just die and then they are reborn and then they just get caught in another net. Like, it's kind of really depressing to think of this universe where magical fish exist and they're being trapped by like all of the garbage humans who are putting nets in the water. Like, I guess, I don't know. That is sort of like 13th Year. We've definitely mentioned that movie a lot and it's pretty dumb, but I think there is like a whole thing about the fisherman like accidentally pulling up the mermaid or whatever. Like that definitely is sort of a trope in some things with like magical sea creatures.
Don't worry, we'll get Tom Hanks on the job in the movie Splash. So
imagine Splash and everything is exactly the same, but instead of it being a mermaid, it's just Tyson.
I'd love that.
He just like up on his boat is just Tyson with his like metal working gear, and he's just like, I'm a Cyclops.
On top of like the eco message, which, take or leave, I like it. It's not like ham-fisted like Fern Gully is, and how Tim Curry literally talks about being the Satan and like polluting the world. Even though I like Fern Gully because it's like one of those stupid movies that just I like.
I'm so nostalgic for that movie, but I understand it's done in a very heavy-handed, not great way.
The end statement is like you can talk about all these things, but you have to do it in a tasteful way that doesn't like grind the whole story to a halt, like the equivalent of like smashing on your brakes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't feel like a very special episode, or it doesn't feel like some sort of weird specific, like that's the thing about infotainment, right? Because we talk about this a lot with this series, and good infotainment, you forget you're being educated. You know what I mean? Like, because it's so immersed in the lore of the book, you're like, oh, I'm just learning about what's happening with Percy Jackson. You forget you're learning about mythology or learning about, who knows what else. Sometimes you learn about history and other things.
Yeah, like we learn about like this, like an example is we learn about this new creature, Bessie, which we don't get its name, but I love the description because, again, it's the Greeks. It's like, well, cow, sea serpents. I love it. I'm going to read the description of Bessie because, Percy goes into the water and tries to save this wonderful sea cow. The front half was a calf, a baby with black fur and a big, sad brown eyes, and a white muzzle, and its back half was black and brown snaky tail with fins running down the bottom and top, like an enormous eel. Again, the Greeks are just like, hey, let's take these two things and make it better.
Yeah, that's totally most Greek creatures, really. They're like, so you're gonna take a scorpion, kind of mix that with like, what else we're gonna, like, they just kind of just take a bunch of animals, you know what I mean? Like, chimera is like a good example of that. I mean, literally the word chimera gets used all the time for combination of species, so it's kind of funny that it comes from that. So it's, it's a very common Greek practice of being like, it's really scary. All right, we're gonna take a cow. But it's not just any cow. It's got an eel tail.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm just now imagining, Cece, it's half man and half fish. Go on. The top half is a fish and the bottom half is a man. That's super scary.
That is scary, actually. If you saw that walking down the street, would you not pee your pants?
No, I'd be like, high five. And he like puts it like his like fish hand.
He gives you your flipper.
Yeah. Oh god. Or it's the idea of like having like a horse head on a human body that's like reverse Chiron. It's like the horse head masks?
Yes, exactly, just like the horse head mask. Yikes.
Like the dark part of the internet with like having like personas, it's almost the exact same thing. It's like, well, you see, my fox has like silver hair, and it's half cyborg and half witch and half demon, and this is things that happen.
It's like, that's too many halves. That's more than a whole.
And it's like my persona was an orphan that was like abandoned by his parents, and their parents died because they're evil, and they're looking like their Mad Libs thing. Wizard witches. Not to make fun of furries.
Not to make fun of furries or anything. We support you.
Not to make fun of furries, because you guys are what you are. And you know what? You guys are fun, because some of the people I know that are great furries. Yeah, you guys are terrific.
I bet someone definitely has like a fursona or like, I don't know what you call it if it's not a furry animal, that is like definitely like a cow eel creature. That definitely is out there.
Now I'm just like imagining like a bunch of like Greek people that just like look like people like furries. They just have like the fox tails and the ears, and they're just like, we are going to make a manticore.
Yeah, my OC is a manticore.
Rar XD. Glump. Oh my god. I just had like a war flashback. Do you remember glomping?
Vaguely.
Where people would like hug you and just say glump.
Yeah, I do. Wow.
I just had a war flashback.
That really just sent me right back to MySpace. It really, I'm in MySpace, I'm on my MySpace, in my mind palace, and I see it, and it has like a purple swirly background, and a lot of annoying, weird GIFs of like, you know, some Don Hertzfeldt animation, and
Roar XD.
Roar means I love you in dinosaur. I had a cookie, but I eated it. Yeah, all of those real edgelord kind of, you know, happy bunny.
I loved you, taco.
Oh, yeah.
I loved you. With
wow.
Gur. Gur dancing.
What a dark, weird time that was, huh?
I like speaking about like how we like just put the brakes onto our episode. Yep. I just compared Greeks to furries.
I mean, not a lot of stuff happens plot-wise, really, in this chapter. Like, he rescues Bessie.
Yes, like I said before, like, I love the idea of the naming conventions of naming something Bessie or Bertha or, I don't know, Margaret or Peggy. Actually I guess Margaret and Peggy are the same thing. Or it's like Richard and Dickard.
Nope, that's not a name.
Yes, it is now.
It is now, yeah. It's really rising in the baby names right now. This is my sweet baby board, Dickard. Horrible. Deckard, that's a name. Just really the change in one letter. It really makes a world of difference. Yeah, the whole rescue of Bessie, it goes on for a little while because I think they just have to describe the details of how Percy, like, he can't use the sword because it scares Bessie, and so he has to find this roundabout way to help her instead, where he like is lifting the boat that she's tangled with, and he's like untangling each section of the net a bit at a time, and he even says how long it's taking, and it's sort of like this very meticulous, frustrating process. And I definitely think that there's really only two purposes to this scene. One is the, I keep wanting to say the happening, and it's not the happening, it's the stirring. The stirring is happening.
No, what are you talking about? The happening, Percy Jackson comes out and all the plants are attacking people, and Demeanor's like ha ha ha.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is different. It's the ocean instead. But the two purposes of this scene are the stirring. We have to talk about that. We have to remember, oh right, there are these different creatures that are emerging because there's some sort of ancient time that occurs every once in a while where all of like these dormant creatures emerge, and I don't know, like that's why they mention that like way early on when we encounter Dr. Thorne. And then the only other real reason to have the scene be so detailed is, I think, because Percy can't use his sword, so it's kind of like this specific, I don't know, lesson about how he is usually quick to do something like a physical action to try and quickly solve something. But in this case, he has to almost like solve a puzzle. Like, okay, well, she is scared of the sword, so I can't take out Riptide, but there has to be another way to help her, kind of thing. And I think that maybe is like a broader lesson he might be learning in this book, like what Chiron said about how both he and Talia are impulsive and how they like jump to like make decisions that maybe they don't think things through. So in this scenario, he has to think things through. That's like the main like, I don't know, the two themes that we're tackling in this scene.
It's kind of like the idea of it's like might versus light almost, where it's like Percy Jackson could easily have solved this issue with his sword. But again, he's the embodiment of a good character. So when he sees that Bessie's like kind of scared, like, oh God, I got to do this the old fashioned way rather than just doing like the equivalent of like Harrison Ford shooting the sword guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Shooting the sword guy. It's the same idea. Like, he has to do the hard thing because it's the right thing to do.
Well, yeah, because they did the exact same thing in Temple of Doom, but, you know, Indy that goes for his gun and his gun isn't there, so he has to fight these guys.
Exactly, because the second time you can't do it.
Percy's able to, like, figure out this problem, you know, it's many hours, and I guess the most important thing when it comes to Rick Riordan, like, writing this chapter is maybe he needed to fulfill a page count, but also it's the idea of every time we've had, like, a situation that seems like, why are they doing this? Like, sometimes it either comes back in some way, shape, or form, either through a lesson, or Percy Jackson has to figure out something like, what happens if he doesn't have a sword? Because do you remember in the first book what Ares said to Percy?
What did he say to Percy? I don't remember.
Remember he said that his sword might fail him one day?
Right. I forgot about that. That was a while ago. That was almost a year ago.
Oh yeah, it's almost a year ago. Remember Ares cursed Percy, like when they were fighting on the beach, and he says that one day your sword will fail you.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because I think that's an important thing to remember too, is that he has this weapon, this tool that he uses in almost every fight or interaction that he has, and it gets a little bit perfunctory and boring to be like, and then he took out Riptide, and then he took care of the monsters, and it was done. The end. Like, it's way more interesting to introduce like the drama of it not working sometimes.
Yes, it's the equivalent of like using the lightsaber all the time. The reason why the prequels are so boring, it's all lightsabers. Same as with like the proton packs and Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters, they probably use it for maybe like 2 minutes of total screen time. It might be less. I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Yes, and then you have Ghostbusters Answer the Call, which is not a good movie. And then one of the specific reasons is they literally have like guns and they just use proton packs all the time, and it's not fun.
Yeah, because you lose the weight of the weapon if you use it all the time. And I do think that we're almost reaching saturation with Riptide. I really got the sense in the past, I mean, maybe more so in The Lightning Thief, it really did feel like he used Riptide almost for every interaction.
See, this is why I like the book The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, because in that book series there's like these magical swords that can literally cut through anything, and like if they touch somebody, like their limbs will like just die and they have to be amputated. And the main dilemma of the book, there's not really even a spoiler, is one of the characters just hates these things, and he's given an opportunity to have one. He's like, nah, not gonna use it. I'll just say this, swords are cool, but they're cool because, you know, it's more of personal fighting, and it's not like nunchucks or like lightsabers, because like you have like, I'm doing my nerd voice right now because it's like you get like like intergalactic like cutting each other and stuff. Okay, I gotta stop before I give myself a brain aneurysm.
Or you're just gonna sound like that for the rest of your life.
Yes, it's gonna be like, so why I like swords is because they're so personal weapons, unlike nunchucks or like throwing stars or kunai.
You sound like Dwight Schrute. Not the voice you're doing, but just sort of the gist of what you're saying is very Dwight Schrute. I like nunchucks. Nunchucks. No. Actually, he'd be like, I like swords. It's a personal fight. Look a man in the eyes. Stab him. You know he's dead. Like, that's what he would say.
Jim, I like swords. You can stab someone, then you can like see them as, you know, they're gushing blood into your face.
As the light dies in their eyes.
I like swords, but it's also the idea of, you know, they can get oversaturated. Same as with my favorite thing is like maidens and crossbows and arrows. Like that got so exhausted so fast because they used them so quickly, and like everything, like literally everything.
Hypersaturation of that around Hunger Games for sure.
And now no one uses them anymore. Same as like swords. Like I like swords, but it's, you know, I like Riptide. It's a cool sword, but the idea of like, and Percy used his sword again, is kind of boring. He literally has water powers. Like he can like vibrate someone's water like right out of them if he really wanted to.
It's like a twofold thing, too, because it's both the actual weapon itself can get very boring, and you want it to be a little bit more dynamic, like the different fights he has. He has to, you know, fight with his brain, think of like a more clever way to solve the problem.
Which is funny because we have the idea of Annabeth. She's the one that does all the thinking, while Percy does all the fighting.
Yeah, that's true. He has to do the thinking now because Annabeth isn't here. Also, it's just like plot-wise, like character-wise, Riptide is an excuse for Percy to solve all of his problems in an easy way a lot of times. And I think, I mean, it's not like it's easy necessarily for him to have a sword fight, but that's the thing that he's good at, is sword fighting, because he's a demigod. Maybe not being able to use a weapon in certain circumstances, or having a scenario where a problem can't be solved with just, you know, a like slash and hack of this sword that he has with him all the time. I mean, it literally is always with him. He literally reaches into his pocket and it will materialize. Like it's literally almost the perfect weapon that he can't even drop it.
See, there's going to be that one time where Percy Jackson actually has to write something down, and he actually has to use Riptide for its pen form.
For a pen, yeah, exactly.
And it's not going to, I mean, I'm sure, like, in universe it probably does work, but it'd be, the funny drama is he, like, clicks it, like, oh yeah, it's a sword.
And then it becomes a sword. He just stabs the paper like, ah.
Yeah, it's, I guess, like, I figure out a way to, like, write something, even though, you know, Riptide probably just turns into a regular pen when someone else uses it. Like, if someone has it, it just, it's just a pen.
Cut to when he's older, like, taking the SATs, and he just clicks the pen, and he's just like, oh, I stabbed the SAT.
He has to, like, label it, like, Riptide, and then he has, like, his other pens.
So, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. It's like the weapon itself can get a little bit boring, and also he needs to learn a lesson about thinking things through and solving problems in more nuanced ways, other than being like, I'm gonna stab it, I'll stab at it until the problem's fixed. Which is what he mostly does.
That's also a thing in Greek dramas. A lot of the time it's like you can use might for so long until you have to deal with something spiritual. That's why I like in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of my favorite parts is Indy's about to go find the Ark of the Covenant. Was it Ravenscroft? I'm so sorry if I'm getting the name wrong. It's been like 10 minutes since I've watched Indiana Jones. But he's talking to Indy and he's like, this is something you've never, you know, really gone up against. You pretty much like you're going up against God itself. And Andy's like, yeah, I'm okay. He throws a gun into a suitcase. Like he's going to use a gun to defeat God. There's some things you can't defeat with just sheer might.
Right, yeah, that would just be like sort of presumptuous in a way to assume, oh, I'm just gonna punch my way to the top. I'm gonna use brute strength to fix my problems, which, I mean, Percy's not really shown as having like brute strength necessarily, but he doesn't think as much, and that's definitely Annabeth's like characterization, is that she fixes things with her brain.
So the best thing that Percy can do is he's really good at coming up with things on his feet. Like his best decisions are the ones that he doesn't really think about. You know, kind of like when Percy jumps off the gateway arch, like he wasn't really thinking. He just pure instinct. He's really good with pure instinct. When he has to outsmart something, he's kind of like between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, when he actually has to like strategize, he doesn't do such a great job, which maybe speaks to him and Talia having such a thing with the capture the flag. They couldn't come to a consensus on how to like tackle this problem because they didn't take into account like, oh, when you're making a plan, you should also be collaborating with people. So that's another thing too. I think this book is probably going to be a story about collaboration. Even the Oracle is all about, you know, the hunters and the campers working together. It's about working together, seeing past your differences, deciding, okay, I'm going to do my part in this larger plan. I'm not just going to go running guns blazing or swords blazing, I guess, to go fix this problem. If you remember, the reason Annabeth is where she is because Percy went off alone. So there's like a lot to be said about people working together, I think, in this book. Especially
like coming back a little bit about, you know, the capture the flag game. The two people that aren't there, the two people that they would need to make that strategy is Annabeth and Clarice. Annabeth's mom is, you know, Athena, goddess of, you know, strategy.
Yeah.
Clarice's dad is the god of war. Obviously, they're going to have kind of something similar. You know, Clarice is going to have war tactics, while Annabeth kind of has strategy for everything, not just war. And that's the interesting thing is you have like these gods that aren't really, I guess, again, it's the idea of it's like genetics dictate personalities. Like you're going to have these two people who, in the first book, Poseidon and Zeus fought. So obviously Percy and Thalia are going to fight almost this exact same way over pettiness because they were literally, the gods were about to go to war over pretty much like he said, she said type of situation.
Well, they're both very strong-willed, for sure. There's a lot of strong-willed characters in this book, and it makes sense because they're demigods, and they have, like, sort of a chip on their shoulder, you know what I mean? Or they're maybe not demigods, they're hunters of Artemis who aren't necessarily demigods, but, you know, the hunters of Artemis are very high and mighty about themselves. They think that they're right in every way. We'll talk about that later when we talk about Nico spying on them. And then Percy too, and Talia, like no one can really agree on how to solve something because they're all bickering amongst themselves. Like, no, I'll be the hero. I'll fix it. And like they have to come together. Jesus, like, listen to each other.
Especially when it comes to Greek tragedies, hubris usually is the main foil for everything.
That's what it is. It's hubris. It's thinking, oh, I can do this. I can do this all by myself.
Yes. And every time we've learned about it, Percy Jackson has failed every time he's used hubris.
It's true. And he said that hubris wasn't his problem, right? He even said to Annabeth, he's like, oh, I don't get it. I think that the world wouldn't be as great of a place if it was just me doing things. That's what he says in his speech, but in his behavior, he doesn't often remember that he needs to depend on other people.
So there's a much different thing. Like, he wouldn't want to rule the world, but he's sure as heck going to be able to like rule that situation of when he's in battle, and like he'll be the first person that he's going to go gung ho about. Like, he doesn't have to rule the world. He can rule he's almost like the person that's going to rule in that moment.
Yeah, he's a problem solver. He's like, I don't know what I'll do. I have to do the right thing. And that probably connects back to his loyalty, too. It's very related. Like, he just is like, there's a problem. There's the right thing to do. I have to help my friend. And that can be his downfall sometimes because he's like, I'll help them at the expense of maybe not thinking through that I don't have the means to do that.
So you know what the real villain of the story is, B?
What?
Hummus.
Hummus is the real villain.
Moving on a little bit, Percy Jackson shoots out of the water and like hops onto Blackjack, and like the way I'm looking at this is like a water spigot. Like, he just like shoots out, kind of like Augustus Gloop in Willy Wonka. Like, he like goes up like the tube, almost like that.
I was more picturing him like shooting up in the air like a dolphin.
Oh yeah, okay. So like he's like kicking his legs. I can't do a dolphin. I'm sorry. But yeah, he shoots up into the air and hops on a Blackjack's back because this is like awesome OC stuff. And like he like grabs onto his mane and they fly away. And Percy actually puts on the invisibility cap as he like goes and lands because he notices someone up into the pavilion.
And he's like, wait a second, it's not breakfast time yet. So this is
what is this? Some type of breakfast club?
Because Nico is spying, and then he's spying also, but Nico doesn't know that he's spying, so there's a lot of layers of secrecy going on here.
What are you talking about, B? He's eavesdropping. There's a difference between spying and eavesdropping.
Okay, yeah. They're similar. He's dropping eaves. He's dropping eaves all over the ground.
I'm not dropping no eaves, sir.
Not to be confused with Talia dropping eaves of branches, because she was a tree.
I guess I should like make like a tree and get out of here.
Make like a tree and needle. Because she was a pine tree. She didn't have leaves.
Man, that was a prickly situation she was in. But I like the idea of, Percy Jackson finally puts on the invisibility cap of Annabeth. And he's like, oh my god, I've never been invisible before. I'm going to do things like spy.
Yeah, immediately, right? He's a teenage boy and he's like, all right, I'm going to spy on these girls. But not in the way you think.
Not in the creepy way, the way that Harry Potter didn't do, surprisingly.
Thank goodness. I couldn't stand a scene like that. That would be so gross. Anyway, instead they're spying on the girls to see what the heck's going on with, we already talked about this, what's her name? Phoebe. So Phoebe has a thing with the Stoll brothers where we already knew this was going to happen. They played a horrible trick where they gave her this shirt that had Minotaur blood on it, which is like an acid, so she's all burned up and messed up and she can't go on the quest, and they're like, oh, we're one person short. So this is like the conversation he's overhearing, and Nico's also overhearing because they're both eavesdropping, though Nico can't see him because of the invisibility hat.
Which I'm surprised, like, for master trackers, they can't see two boys.
Yeah, I guess they can't. It's interesting because they're supposed to not be around boys, but there they are, just like kind of stage whispering all their business.
The idea that like Zoe Nightshade doesn't have like her like Mandar detector on, she's just like, what?
Yeah, right? Like, I thought that was kind of funny that she didn't notice that they were there, but
it's like, I just imagine that's like her superpower. She just detects men.
It's like, oh, there's dudes here, gross.
I really do enjoy the conversation they have because it's the idea of, can we replace Phoebe? No, we can't. There's no time. It's going to be you and me. Because, Bianca and Zoe are going to have to go on the quest with both Thalia and Grover, they can't replace the next person. So it's just like, well,
Yeah.
again, it's like more nails in the coffin, kind of. It's just like, well, I have someone that's inexperienced, and it's me, plus these other two hotheads.
Yeah, let me read some of the dialogue that they overhear. Bianca, hear me. Zoe's voice was strained. I can't explain, but I have a sense that we should not pick someone else. It would be too dangerous. They would meet an end worse than Phoebe's. I don't want Chiron choosing a camper as our fifth companion, and I don't want to risk another hunter. Bianca was silent. You should tell Talia the rest of your dream. No, it would not help. But if your suspicions are correct about the general, so there's all sorts of stuff going on, little sneaky tidbits of information that other people are having dreams and learning things, but we don't know what they are.
I mean, it's the same thing as like last book with like Clarice didn't want to share the prophecy until it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it's a similar thing. So there's information we don't know that Percy doesn't know. But yeah, the general, so that's who Dr. Thorne was referring to. I don't know who that is, though. We don't know who that is, right?
No, we don't know who that is. All we know is that Dr. Thorne was going to call the general, and that the general is this big bad dude.
The big bad. I guess he's like one of the main villains of this book. But again, there's a lot of villains going on, different big and small villains, because there's Kronos, there's Luke, there's a couple people.
It's a hierarchy. Think of it like, I guess, like a corporation. You have Kronos at the top, and then you have like middle managers, and then regional managers, and then office managers.
So I thought that was interesting. And then also the thing about Talia was interesting. Tell Talia about your dream, if your suspicions are correct about the general. Like, I'm not sure why specifically Talia they would say something. And yeah, I think that one of the biggest twists would be like if Talia decided to be a hunter, because she hates them so much. She protests them so much. So she has all this weird baggage with Zoe. And I think something's going to happen where they like reconcile to the point where she's like, oh, actually, I think I should be a hunter of Artemis. But I don't know. That's just like my guess. I'm getting that feeling like it would be such a twist if she did.
What I've always said is like, if you're going to do something, it has to be justified rather than it has to happen like almost like forced. Like, if they're going to have some sort of like reconciliation, you need to have it in a way that's almost tasteful.
I think they're going to have a reconciliation.
But also, we don't know the extent of like why Zoe and Thalia hate each other so much. We don't know a lot of the extent of like pretty much anything. And if Thalia was to join, again, it's the idea of she'd actually have to put away her own morals, and she'd have to like, not that she would have to hate men, but she'd have to like pretty much like leave the world again. I mean, in theory, she could.
Yeah, and cut ties with people, you know, and she just missed out on so much of her life, too. So I think there's that aspect, too. Like, she wouldn't want to, like, dedicate herself to this new cause when, like, she had been trapped as a tree for several years and missed out on this big chunk of her life.
It's just a different type of purgatory. This one's just mobile.
Right, yeah. That's kind of interesting. I didn't think about that.
And also, you know, she'd have to renounce her dad and have to join Artemis. And there's
right.
a lot that has to go with it. Like, if it was going to happen, it would have to be something that's either, like, midway through the book or just at the end.
Yeah, so there's that. God, they really overhear a lot of stuff. So they don't want to pick a companion. And then they say that they're leaving first light, basically. So pretty soon, because it's pretty late in the night, early in the morning, whatever you want to say.
Oh, thank God that Percy Jackson has an obsidian black horse.
Yeah, right, just blending in. So it's pretty soon that they are going to leave, and I think everyone's panicking. Nico is panicking because he knows that his sister has to leave soon, and there's no one really. There's one less person to watch over her. He can't go because he has none of the means to go, and then this is when finally Percy reveals himself, and they have this sort of like. The conversation goes pretty quickly where Nico's like, I'm going to go save my sister. And he's like, you have none of the means to do that. You've never been on a quest. You're new to this completely. They would immediately find you. They would send you back here. There's so many reasons why you can't do this. And he's like, okay, you go.
Yeah, and it's one of those interesting things where normally in kids' books or young adult books, Nico would probably stow away and still go on the quest. But here he's just very content with just like, I want you to do this.
You go then, buddy.
We have this different thing where Nico's just like, promise me that you'll watch over her and protect her. And Percy's like, I really wish I could, but I have to say yes to the situation. But again, it's the idea of in the back of his head, it's like, even I couldn't promise that to like Annabeth. And she is where she is right now because I can't promise to protect her. And it's like one of those things, like I said before, it's like the idea of making a promise in Greek is like, if you break that promise, it's like punishable by death. It's like the worst thing you could possibly do. Like, I guess the best way to put it is you can break a promise and you can cheat on your wife. Breaking the promise is worse than cheating on your wife in Greek culture.
Though I guess that is kind of a promise, though.
Yes, it is. But like, I promise I'm going to edit this. No, it's like the difference of it's like I love this person, but it's also the idea of it's like, here, I'll give an example, B. The idea of it's like, hey, B, I'm going to edit this episode and I don't do it. Now we have failed.
You're evil.
Our listeners. And not only have I failed myself, I have failed you and our listeners and everyone down the line. I have destroyed the empire.
It was you. Yeah, you're actually like one of the most dependable people I know, so I know that wouldn't happen, but
no, but it's like that's the Greek equivalent of you might fail one person, but you're really failing everyone. Like, it's the idea of it's like when like a mom or so. I always hate this when like a mom brings their kid up, like, look at that's the man that ruined your day. Like, oh god, this is terrible, don't do this, don't bring the kid.
Yeah, so he makes this promise though, and like it's really funny. I'm gonna read the dialogue of him and Nico making this agreement because it's really interesting how much Percy wants to avoid making a promise. And now you're thinking about following them on the quest, I guessed? How did you know that? Because if it was my sister, I'd probably be thinking the same thing, but you can't. He looked defiant. Because I'm too young? Because they won't let you. They'll catch you and send you back here. And yeah, because you're too young. You remember the Manticore? There will be lots more like that, more dangerous. Some of the heroes will die. His shoulders sagged. He shifted from foot to foot. Maybe you're right. But you can go for me. Say what? You can turn invisible. You can go. The hunters don't like boys, I reminded him. If they find out, don't let them find out. Follow them invisibly. Keep an eye on my sister. You have to, please. Nico, you're planning to go anyway, aren't you? I wanted to say no, but he looked me in the eyes and I somehow couldn't lie to him. Yeah, I said, I have to find Annabeth. I have to help, even if they don't want me to. I won't tell on you, he said. But you have to promise to keep my sister safe. That's a big thing to promise, Nico, on a trip like this. Besides, she's got Zoe, Grover, Talia. Promise, he insisted. I'll do my best, I promise that. Then get going then. And it's so funny that he's like, okay, that's a big thing to promise. Well, that's also a big, I'll do my best. That's what I promise. Like, he really goes out of his way to make sure it's not too specific of a promise.
I feel like there's also like a catch-22 to this because it's the idea of, Percy Jackson saved him to begin with up in the first chapter, and now he has to make this promise. It's like,
I know, right? It's so sweet.
Is he going to be like Superman to Nico? Because it's the idea of this is like the most innocent thing you can possibly do, of having like Nico's like, I need you to save my sister, and he's like, okay, I'll try. Like, he doesn't even say I try. Like, they don't even like pinky promise. It's like Nico is so dead set sure that he's going to help her, and he's going to, no matter what he does, it's like the idea of Percy Jackson, again, is chaotic good. Like, if he was lawful good, like, he would just say it in a heartbeat, but here he's more hesitant. And I like Nico as a character because he's just like, again, he plays board games and like plays tabletop games. His idea of like how dangerous something is the equivalent of numbers on a printed piece of paper.
Right, exactly. He doesn't have any experience with this. Like, he can't really go save his sister. He does not have the means to. He would just be, putting his own life in his hands, and he would probably be sent home anyway because the hunters would find him. So it's not really, there's no way to really help his sister other than to ask Percy to help his sister. That's, he has to use Percy, essentially.
Now, here's the number one big question, B. How well do you think Percy's going to keep on this promise?
I think he'll do his best, right? Because that's what he promises. He doesn't promise he's going to save the sister. He very specifically and intentionally has this promise phrased in a way where he says he'll do his best. And I do think that's true. I think Percy always does his best. I think he is a very moralistic person. He's very loyal and believes in doing the right thing, and he'll do the right thing. He might not be able to save her, though. I don't know if that's the case. She is a new character, so I would be surprised if she died so early, because I would be, I don't know, I'd be kind of disappointed in the narrative. I would hope that we get to see more of her in later books somehow, or we get like a reconciliation between her and her brother because of what happened with the Hunters of Artemis and her like denying that. So who knows? I don't know if she's going to necessarily die or anything, but it's a nebulous thing to promise that you're going to protect someone. And again, he doesn't even promise that. He promises he'll do his best. So it's like, I can't know for sure how things are going to happen. I mean, I know that something bad is going to happen to at least one person in their group, and I can't guess who that's going to be yet. But it'll be devastating in different ways depending on which character it is.
Yes, and we'll find out. And it's one of those unique things when it comes to Percy Jackson is the idea of, you can make a promise or we have a prophecy and things might not turn out the way it seems. And here we have the idea of we have a character like Nico, we have a character like Percy who are having like this very intimate conversation when really they're just eavesdropping on a person and they're just getting ready. Like Percy is pretty much doesn't even have a bag packed. He's just going to go on this quest without a drachma to his name.
Yeah, right. He doesn't even have anything with him. He just has the clothes on his back, really, and a couple things. He doesn't even have his shield.
The only thing that he grabbed was the baseball cap, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think this is now the time of the chapter where I ask you, B, what is the name of the next chapter?
So the name of the next chapter is Chapter 9, I Learn How to Grow Zombies. What does that mean? Zombies.
Oh no, B. What is that supposed to mean?
Rick Riordan and your chapter titles. I don't know. It's probably not going to be literal zombies, right? It'll be some sort of like undead Greek thing. Or maybe it's not even... I literally do not have any idea what this chapter title means. It's super esoteric and could not even mean what I might think it means. So I'm pretty on the fence as to like defining what it could be. But oh god, I don't know. I can't even guess what it could be. If there's going to be literal zombies or if this is just sort of like a pithy joke that it's not actually a zombie. It's like something else.
Yes, well, we will find out next week as we try to learn how to grow zombies. All I recommend when it comes to growing zombies is make sure there's plenty of light and, there's good topsoil. And make sure that you have love and affection. And if you're going to grow zombies, you're going to need the song Zombie by the Cranberries. So, B, did we get any messages this week?
Yeah, so we got an email from Brian who says, "Love your podcast. Hi, Zack and B. Found your podcast when you were halfway through Lightning Thief. I had been looking for a podcast for ages pertaining to the Percy Jackson series for a while. Having read all Rick Riordan's books, I came across yours and love your thoughts on the books. I don't know how Zack holds himself back from spilling what's in the later books, though. Keep up the great work, Brian D." It's very difficult, I think. I'm actually barred from even looking at the emails, so that's why Zack has to send me email screenshots so I can see them, and sometimes he censors stuff out so I don't get spoiled. So there's a lot of careful editing involved in me not getting spoiled with these books.
For me, when I send B like a thing that might have a spoiler, it's like I feel like the FBI where I have things that are like redacted. Have you ever seen like just blacked out things? Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, just an entire page. Like, yeah, you send me an email and like an entire paragraph is scribbled out.
Yes. And
it's like, I think that in the future you guys should, and that's how the sentence starts, and then it's just a block.
So for me, when it comes to like not spoiling B, this is just something that I love. Is for me, when I was younger, I loved magic. And one of the main principles of magic is misdirection. So I can say something, and as long as I misdirect them in some way, shape, or form, I'm not technically spoiling them.
Yeah, you try to confuse me. I know that you do. You often say things that I think are intentionally trying to make me think one thing. Sometimes I guess right. Sometimes I really do guess right. Sometimes I don't. This isn't really a game necessarily. Like, I'm not failing at the podcast if I don't guess the plot, but...
Well, the difference, though, is some things I lie about and some things I'm actually telling the truth. And sometimes I forget.
Also, it wouldn't be fun if I knew everything. If it was so predictable that I could guess absolutely every plot point, then it wouldn't be a fun podcast. It wouldn't be a fun reading experience.
The thing that I've noticed when it came to other Percy Jackson podcasts, no offense other ones, is that when it comes to like our show, what makes ours unique is we have this dynamic because we're able to people are able to experience the books for the first time through a different person's perspective, even if they've read them thousands of times. Whereas when it comes to Percy Jackson related content, people just want to talk about everything all at once, and then suddenly they don't have anything to talk about because
oh yeah, remember in this book? Yeah. I know what you mean. I think I'm going to become that person eventually because I'm going to read these books slowly but surely, and I'm probably going to know more about Percy Jackson than anybody because no one reads a book this slow ever. Like, you and I will be like the experts because even if someone did read all these books, they probably don't remember to the, the minutia that we go over. Like you always say what we're like dissecting an anthill with an atom bomb or something. Like that's what it feels like.
It's true.
And I like that about the show, but it is funny that in some ways I'm not an expert at all about Percy Jackson because I'm so early on in the books and there's so much left to read, but I'm an expert on what I've read so far because every week I've been combing over every chapter and talking with you and like really trying to dissect what I think about it. So it's an interesting way to experience a book series, and it's really like opened my eyes to, I mean, in some ways it's super similar to what I did when I was like studying children's literature in college, but that was the opposite because I was reading like multiple books a week, like instead of one chapter a week. And I try not to read ahead, obviously, because I have to guess on each chapter. So it's like, I'm really stretching out this very specific thing, like taking close reading to like an intense degree of looking at each line and going, okay, well, why did he pick that? And it's kind of interesting, the perspective of this, or like, did he intentionally make the reference to Bessie because it means this? Like, I don't know, maybe.
For me, when it comes to like rereading these books, the interesting thing is I kept forgetting things were in like orders. Like I forgot like when this was supposed to happen because I've read these books so many times where you just like assume, oh, it's going to happen like right now. And you already have that piece of information when you're reading really slowly. Like even I forget things where I'm surprised, like, oh, I thought this was going to happen later on or earlier on, or I see a bit of like foreshadowing of something like, oh, I didn't really notice that until right now. For me, I've always loved the idea of being a time traveler and like seeing like how the future is going to come out. And for me, this is like the funniest thing of like watching B, like, I can't wait for this. And I'm just like, oh, sweet summer child. Thank you so much for that wonderful email. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Thank you for your kind words.
So we got another email from Emily. It says, hey guys, I've never listened to a podcast before, and I only started because I recently suffered an injury that prevented me from running at the moment. So I have to cross-train by riding a stationary bike, and it's extremely boring, and I stumbled upon you guys, which helped pass the time. The third book is my favorite, and I was lucky enough to have an awesome 7th and 8th grade language teacher who adores the books. She would put us into the houses from Harry Potter, districts from Hunger Games, and the cabins from Percy Jackson.
Oh, that's funny.
I was at the Artemis table and with 2 other girls, all of us easily annoyed by the immature guys, and it was only one of the best experiences of my life.
That's very funny.
That was off tangent. I love this book so much because Talia is my absolute favorite, and Zoe too. Also, the dynamic between Artemis and Apollo is so funny because I'm a triplet, so I relate to the whole multiple things. Anyways, I adore hearing other people about the books as much as I do, especially adults, because I've recently turned 18 and I feel people want me to drop out of the fandom and childish passions. It's nice to know people, even adults, can still have these. I love to chat more and plan on staying tuned.
Oh, what a great message. Thank you.
That actually reminded me of one of the reasons why I got into Goosebumps is I remember this. I had a 4th grade teacher who had like stacks of Goosebumps books. I had read a couple before, but she's the one that just like, she had like this rule where, you can take as many books out of the classroom and take it home, and I'd end up bringing like stacks of Goosebumps books. And I really want to give a shout out to Mrs. Gutierrez. If you still live in Bosque Farms, New Mexico, thank you. It was a really nice thing, and it really taught me how to like read books in a way, because I grew up dyslexic. Being able to read Goosebumps very quickly and having access to almost like all of them is what made me really appreciate those books.
Good grade school teachers are super important. Like if you're a teacher out there, you're teaching grade school kids, I like give major props to you because you're like doing like really important work, like helping. I mean, like that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. I think the kind of teachers that you have at that age, like a really good teacher can really make or break whether a kid loves to read. Like I had a teacher, I
don't even care if I name drop him. So I had this teacher in high school. I remember his name is, we'll call him Mr. C. And literally he was the worst English teacher I ever had. The only reason why I remember this teacher is I actually met one of my best friends in the class, but he was like this absolute jerk who would just like give people like pop quizzes. And what he would do is he'd be like, well, this is my last year here. I'm just finished getting my bar exam, so I'm going to be a lawyer and make more money than you guys. You're like, oh, thank you.
I hate teachers like that. I had a teacher who you could probably easily figure out who this teacher was by Googling, but he was an art teacher, but he was also like a popular comic book artist. So the art teacher thing was his day job, and you could tell he hated it. you could tell that he was just like, I'm better than you. People line up at Comic-Con to meet me, and I'm annoyed at all you annoying kids who aren't good at art. It's like, that's I don't like teachers who don't have any sort of dedication to what they're doing, because it's important. Maybe that's why I like Rick Riordan so much, because he's a teacher, and I think you really get the sense that he cares about his students and his readers. It's the same thing. He's teaching younger people.
Just imagine like taking a time machine and being in like one of Rick Riordan's classes pre Percy Jackson. Oh my God, that'd be like so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think the benefit of having Rick Riordan as an author and being an awesome teacher is he actually can pass on this knowledge of being an awesome teacher to kids by making them want to read his books. Hey, Rick, why don't you want to come on our podcast?
Yeah, exactly. He's like a teacher to thousands of kids now. Those things really stick with you, like when you're a kid. Having a really good teacher, when they go out of their way to like really involve you in the lesson, you know what I mean? Like something like, like the listener said, oh, we were sorted into different districts or different cabins, and it it made it fun and interesting and relatable for these kids to read these books. And I love stuff like that, because, years later you remember that and you think, oh, that's why I got into these books so much. Yeah, I don't know. I give major props to people like that who are good teachers who care about their students.
So B, do we get any other messages?
We sure did. Hi, I started your podcast last week and I am catching up pretty quickly. This joke made me laugh really hard while I was driving, and I hope you enjoy the family portrait. I don't draw much, but your jokes are too funny not to. I'm actually going to work on a short comic based on another joke you did that episode.
It always blows my mind when we get fan art for things that just come out of my butt. For some weird reason, it's just like not poop jokes, but it's the idea of having like things I just pulled out randomly that people just get joy out of. Especially like I will die the day that we get like a piece of animation that is just our audio, and then it's just like
like an animatic. I love those. Like for the McElroys and like other podcasts, those are hilarious to me. But
if you do animation, if you did that, my heart would explode. You'd actually see on the local news. I don't know why. For some reason, you probably live in New York or someplace. Like, local boy's heart exploded out of chest.
Oh my God. I love all the Horse and Round art. Literally every one of them is perfect and amazing, and I laugh for 1,000 years when we get them. It's like that we made that joke so long ago, and I thought that we would just sort of keep getting them like right in the aftermath of that episode, but then more people keep discovering our show and then making fan art about it. So it's very funny.
The funny thing is, it's just like one of those things that just popped into my head, and we just started rolling with it.
Yeah, just horsing around. We really leaned into that joke, and that none of the other stuff we've ever talked, none of the analyzation. It's usually just been
gay horse dad
horsing around. Really latched onto that specific scenario.
So B, we wanted to describe this photo.
Oh, it's a beautiful drawing of Chiron, and there's an arrow pointing to Chiron, and then Charlie, I guess that's the dad. He has a nice plaid shirt on, and then Mary Lou, who I guess is the daughter. So she's like riding the horse, and then he's holding hands with the husband. It's really good. It's quite good. I'm really loving the names that you gave them. This is like a Hallmark movie almost. Please, Hallmark, give us money.
And just know one of these days we're going to get an email from Hallmark that says, hey, we want to produce this into an actual movie.
Or we're going to get a cease and desist from Lisa Hannawalt, because she'll just be like, hey, that's the name of our fake show in BoJack Horseman.
Well, we'll just change it to, was it Saddleback Mountain? Saddleback
Mountain, yeah. Something like that. I just realized the pun that you made. That it was a play on another title. I thought you were just kind of thinking of a cowboy name, and then I was like, oh, I see.
I believe we have one more email. What does it say, B?
Yeah, so this is from Helene, who's messaged us a couple times, I think, right? This is Penguin Helene, right? Is the same person. Hi, you two. It's something that has been bothering me for a while now. Percy is 14 in The Titan's Curse, not 13. His birthday is August 18th, and he is 12 in the first book. That means, in Sea of Monsters, a year later, he's 13 and turned 14 shortly after. So now, half a year after Sea of Monsters, he's 14 years old. Sorry, I know, it's not really important, but it bothered me. Keep staying mortal, Helene. P.S. I love how accurate B was about who is going on the quest. Was I accurate? I don't remember how accurate I was.
No, what you predicted was, if I remember correctly, it was everyone that's on the current lineup right now. So Grover, Thalia.
Oh, yeah. So I don't feel bad about nitpicking us about this, though. Like, I don't think you're rude or anything, because I am that same person. I'm very pedantic. In fact, great, awesome children's lit podcast I listened to called SSR. They recently had an episode about James the Giant Peach, and because I'm a Roald Dahl nerd and I'm annoying, I tweeted at them and said, "Hey, first of all, it's not a Tim Burton movie, James the Giant Peach. It's actually Henry Selick, and it's not his first children's book. His first children's book was written a while before that, which was Gremlins. But that's me and my annoying nitpicky knowledge. So I understand that other people are probably listening going like tearing their hair out. Oh, we're saying the wrong thing about Harry Potter. We're misremembering things about the books. By all means, you can message us. I won't take it personally. I'm not like an expert by any means, even though I'm going gradually through this book series. There's going to be stuff that we'll miss.
When it comes to like minor nitpicky things as like a 13 to 14-year-old, it doesn't really matter. It's the same as with one of my favorite interviews with George Lucas when he was making the prequels. Is there the people were like, George, what color is Yoda's blood? Because he gets cut in the scene, and George Lucas has like a solid 3 seconds, and he's just like, green. Oh no, I'm the exact same way. Like when it comes to like nitpicky things, just a specific reason why we have an email let people talk to us is we get to open that channel if we make like something that's wrong and we want to have like a corrections corner. But also, I'm the type of dude that like sits down and like I'll see something wrong. I'm like that's not right. And so for some reason, I'm like turning more into a neckbeard. Like that's not right. He's not wearing this armor. He's wearing mithril. It's one of those things where it's good to have that because if we ever get something wrong, I know 6 people will correct us and we're grateful for it.
Oh yeah, I like being corrected. I like figuring out stuff because it drives me crazy when someone says something wrong on a podcast. I'm like, oh, I want to yell at them and correct them. Please yell at us. Go for it. Like as long as you're nice about it, whatever. Go and tell us. I love getting corrected. It's good for me.
So thank you so much for that wonderful email. We really appreciate it. So we actually have 2 iTunes reviews.
Yeah, so we got 2 iTunes reviews. One is from Cameron, who says, I'm a huge fan of Percy Jackson. I'm on the 4th book of the 2nd series, and I'm in 4th grade. I love the funny reviews. Best podcast ever. Nice, short and sweet.
Yep, short and sweet. I love it. So we got an iTunes review. It says, my favorite podcast. I just turned 11 and found the Percy Jackson series about a year and a half ago. Since then, I have found out that it is the greatest book series of all time, in my opinion. I have pulled my friends into reading Rick's Riot. I'm guessing that's Riordan, but Rick's Riot sounds like the name of an awesome band that Rick Riordan is a part of, like a one-man show.
Yeah. Rick and the Riots.
Rick's Riot. Learning. Teachers are awesome. Stay in school.
Learning. Infotainment.
And he is now so many books ahead of me. I'm on the 2nd book of Heroes of Olympus, and it is great. I don't really listen to podcasts because of my age, but when I found this, I was amazed at how amazing it was. Zach was really holding up and not telling B anything. If I were you, I would not be able to tell them anything. I was amazed at how amazing it was. Zach, you are holding up and not telling B anything. If I were you, I would not be able to hold about telling B. It's really fun to see your guesses, and it's fun to see how wrong they are sometimes. No offense. Sometimes I wonder if you are psychic because of how spot on you are. It is fun to revisit the PGO series with 2 amazing hosts and 2 hilarious hosts, with very interesting commentary on every chapter. I will also try and make an animation of a fake trailer for Horse and Around.
Oh my god!
Sorry for making this so long, but I just think it is amazing on how it is a semi-clean podcast and goes over the books from my favorite author chapter by chapter. P.S. I love Unfortunate Associates as well.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. You listen to both our shows. Yeah, that's really great. Oh, what a sweet message. That's awesome. You're 13 and you're listening to a podcast. I didn't know what podcasts were when I was 13, but I'm really glad that you found this podcast. Or not, 11. You're even younger. You're 11 and you're listening to a podcast. Sorry, I'm making you older.
Oh no, you gotta hype him up. This dude's a hype man now. He's 13 now. He's a big boy.
Yeah. Like when I was 11, I had a Lemony Snicket blog, and I wrote under a pseudonym. So I think it's a similar thing to that. That's really cool.
I think when I was 11, this is a true story. I was headbanging to the Gothic Archies.
Yeah, no, of course I was. I definitely had the Gothic Archies on my on my big shelf of unfortunate event stuff, along with all my other obsessive things, including the video game and the movie, because that was just where I kept everything. Yeah, that's so cool.
Thank you so much for that wonderful message. And it's a wonderful review, and you are amazing. Thank you. So, B, where can they find you?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at bkellygorman.
And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. If you want to follow our Patreon, you can go to Patreon/RadioCampHalfBlood. We have some exclusive content coming soon. We actually have some early access to episodes, as well as we're going to be having next week a Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I just haven't had the time to edit it until this week.
That was a fun episode to record for sure. Also, yeah, I mean, like we just released one of our old bonus episodes on the regular feed, the episode we did about holes, which was pretty fun to do. It was cool I listened to a little bit back, and I don't know, I had a fun time reading that. I think that was like the first time I read that book.
If you want to email our show, you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. Also, we have a big important announcement. We're going to be doing our 1-year anniversary soon.
1-year anniversary, you guys. I'm so excited about this. So Zach just came up with this idea, and I love it very much.
Yes, so the idea that we have is for our 1-year anniversary, the community has totally embraced us, and we've made so many friends through this podcast, not just B and I becoming much better friends. We've made friends with everybody, and the amount of emails and the amount of reviews and the amount of everything. What we want to do is we now have this platform where we talk about Percy Jackson. I can safely say, I guess, that the top podcast on Percy Jackson.
Yeah, it's a small pond, but we're there. we're the slightly bigger fish, the slightly bigger hippocampi.
So one of the opportunities we have now is that we'd like to give people a platform. So we're going to be doing a 1-year anniversary. We're going to talk about the first 3 books currently as a whole and what B has learned through the series, as well as it's almost like a clip show, as well as you guys have this opportunity to actually submit clips. Just go to your phone, voice memo. If you have Audacity, download it and send us a little voice clip about why you like Percy Jackson, why you enjoy and why it's changed your life, and kind of
probably limit to a minute, because
it's about 5 minutes at max. If you guys want to go up to
5 minutes, I guess, is a reasonable amount. Yeah, don't send us a 20-minute thing. I would definitely listen to it, but we can't do a bunch of those. But yeah, that would be awesome.
And then I'd have to also cut it down, and that's no fun. But yeah, so 1 to 5 minute max, please. So there's actually another opportunity that we have here is you just email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. But also we actually set up a voicemail. So if you want to call on the show, don't worry, you're not going to be charged. It's a toll-free number, and we don't get any of your numbers, just the voicemail. So if you call 909-248-4789, you can call in and just leave a voicemail, and we'll put it at the end of the show as well. And the due date for all these submissions is going to be on the 10th, and it will go all there. Please keep it PG if you're going to say heck words.
Oh yeah, that's another thing.
If not, you're going to be bleeped out, so just keep that. Otherwise, or it's going to be a fun episode. We want to have you all involved onto this, and thank you so much. Well, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye, guys.